back to this lesson. So this is part 3 of AB-100 domain 3, which deals with deploy AI-powered business solutions. Okay, so we want to look at how you can deploy AI-powered business solution. And that is what we have been looking at, and we are now in part 3. So we've been discussing operationalizing AI-powered business solution, validating and testing, and then governance. So how do you implement this? So, and in the our previous slides, we look at validation and testing in depth, the tools, your outcome, and your focus as an architect, how you should test, your testing, what should be your testing, what should be your mindset when you want to test, and what should be your tool to what should be tools that you should use, what should be metric and the outcome that you should look at. So we've discussed that, and then we'll continue to the next one. Please, if you are just joining us, kindly like and subscribe and share the video with someone. All right, so on this slide 74, on domain 3, we have agent performance metric. So agent metric, how do you use agent metric to determine performance? You know, you are collecting metric from various tools that you are using, and then you also collect metric from the agent. Not only metric, architecture metric, you also get metric from the agent. And then what should be the example of metric that you should collect, and what should be the nature or the form of this metric? So we have the metric group that you should collect from agent using your application insight, Azure Monitor, or Microsoft Analytics platform, or Microsoft or Power Platform, or Copilot Studio Analytics platform. So we have metric group and examples. The first one is quantitative and numerical metrics. Okay, so they are just like numerical metric that you can use, that you can easily visualize using dashboard or Power BI tools. So quantitative metric, example of metric you can collect here are accuracy, response time, success rate, failure rate, or token efficiency. Okay. Then quality metric, quality are textual metric. They are textual analysis that you have collected using application insight or Azure Monitor, and then analyzing this, you can analyze using log analytic workspace using KQL language. KQL is called custom query language. It enables you analyze telemetry logs in real time, okay, and generate insight from it. You can also collect the outcome of this SQL language to Power BI for visualization and for analysis on dashboard. So quality metric that you should collect, examples are user satisfaction, coherence. That's coherence is always a measure of, measure of fluency or how accurate the agent is performing. Then we have follow-up understanding and logical reasoning. So this is logical reasoning of the agent. You know, it's using LLM based model. So the logical reasoning, how to determine how intelligent the agent is, you have to determine the level of intelligence of the base model. Okay. So knowledge coverage. So the metric group that you can collect in knowledge coverage are correct documents, okay, relevant passages, and complete context. So we have said that when you are chunking documents, make sure they are chunked based on context. If context is not complete, then the agent can also generate incomplete output. For example, if you are chunking a document and then you chunk into phrases and phrases are not connected, then agent will not understand what is in the chunk. So RAG database or semantic index data must be properly chunked and indexed, okay, and make sure each chunk contains complete context. Then we have operational. So what are examples of operational metric that you can collect? You can collect stability metric, load handling, no crashes, retries, dependency, health. Then guardrail compliance, metric that you can collect. Example of metric under guardrail compliance are no restricted action, no data leaks, no policy violations. So these are examples. And life cycle. So the entire life cycle metric are plan, design, test, plan, design, test, execute, measure, tune, retest, and deploy. Remember, it is a loop: plan, design, test, execute, measure, tune, and retest. When you retest, then you deploy. So you can see the entire life cycle. So you are getting metric from planning, getting metric from designing, getting metric from execution, getting metric from measurement, from your observability tools, getting metric from your tuning activity. And when you retest, what are the output of the test, what are the metric you collected, and deployment metric. So very, very important. And these are agent metric that you can work with for agentic AI system performance. Model validation. So custom AI model validation criteria. Remember, when we are talking about model, we are talking about the base model, your LLM or SLM model, like Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot itself, Office 365 Copilot. So architecture term under model validation should be looking at accuracy of the model, latency of the model, how fast is the model, throughput of the model, how fast does it generate output, does it generate answer, then how fast does it respond. You can look at grounding integrity, how grounded is the information that the base model is generating, and then how grounded in company data is it. This is grounding integrity and human in the loop. So remember, human in the loop is also interacting with the output of the base model. How does the base model interact with human in the loop? Does it send right information to human in the loop or wrong information? And when human in the loop rejects, does it stop the activity? Or when human in the loop accepts, does it function? So let's look at the details of what we have under model validation. That's customizing AI model validation criteria. So point number one, validate whether the model is accurate, reliable, safe, cost-effective, scalable, and aligned with business goals. Okay, this is very, very important. Very, very important. Make sure base model align with business goal. Make sure base model, you are using a base model that is allowed in the business. For example, I work with a company and they use Microsoft ecosystem, and the only model that is allowed for anything you want to deploy in the organization is Copilot. Why? Because they've received a warranty, they've signed an agreement with Microsoft that there will be no data leakage, that their data is protected 100%, and that is why they limit the use of any model, any base model, to Copilot. So if you are working with such a company, then the only model you'll be allowed to use is Copilot, irrespective of whether Copilot can perform the task or not. You still have to use Copilot. Okay, so validate the model, validate whether the model is accurate, very important. Validate for reliability, validate for safety, validate for cost effectiveness, validate for scalability, validate whether it is aligned with a business policy and business goals. The next point we have here is quantitative criteria. So quantitative metric, as we have said, will allow you to measure the business KPI. It will allow you to measure ROI, TCO, and to also detect anomaly and mitigate risk. So quantitative criteria include accuracy rate, latency rate, throughput rate, error rate, token efficiency rate, and drift indicator rate. So these are quantitative criteria that should be looking into for validation. Then we have qualitative criteria. These are textual analysis of the model. So you can analyze this by collecting logs from the model. You can use conversation, you can use the reasoning, you can use the outputs of the model to also measure qualitative, to also validate the agent qualitatively. So qualitative criteria here include relevance, completeness, reasoning consistency, grounding integrity, and user experience. Okay. So safety validation says safety. This is checking whether the model comply with a company policy. Does it implement under guardrail? Does it operate within the boundary of the business domain? Does it follow context? Does it use business context? Okay, so all this does it use data access and use data safely? So all these are what you should also validate. So safety validation checks include role-based access control, RBAC, data loss prevention in Microsoft Power Platform, DLP, prohibited content that you should never use, okay, prohibited content that you should never access, or prohibited tasks that you should never do, so, and tasks that you should always escalate to human in the loop. So auditability is the entire process auditable. Then human in the loop, guardrail, how often does it send action to human in the loop to perform when it is supposed to? Then guardrail, how does he implement guardrail? Does he abide by conflict policy? Does he operate within the compliance standard and boundary that has been set? Does he operate within the bounded context and the business language and information that it has been supplied with? Then approved grounding sources. Does he use approved grounding sources like your SharePoint, OneDrive, or blob storage, OneLake, Azure blob storage, Cosmos DB, RAG database, Azure SQL database, or warehouse, or wherever the grounding data is coming from? Or is it connected and using the approved grounding sources, or is it just using the information from its own memory? So all these are what you can use to validate base model and the architecture terms that you can apply here. Okay, so the next is prompt validation. So you can see this is in-depth knowledge and in-depth teaching. So we are moving from model validation to prompt validation. So remember, when you are even building, the first thing is when you have determined the requirement, the problem, and you have turned the problem into solution, and you have choose agent that you want to design the use. The next thing is to start choosing your base model, and then you validate the model. Then you design your prompt. So prompt is a skill that the agent will use to perform this task. Okay, so prompt is just like the information. Okay, if you want to employ someone, you employ based on their experience and certification. So experience and certification is to an employee is just like is the same thing as prompt to an agent. Okay, so prompt validation, validate effective Copilot prompt best practice. So these are the best practices you should follow, and these are the architecture terms that you should use in your design. So the first one is goal. What is the goal of the prompt? What is the prompt designed to do? Okay, then the next one is context. Context is business domain information, business domain language, and the business domain data or memory and state of the business. So make sure the prompt is also grounded in business context or in domain context. Then we have instructions. These are the instructions that you have included in the prompt for the agent to perform a particular task. So this instruction can be role-based, it can be example-based, or it can be zero shot, few shots, or chain of thought. It can be sequential or concurrency. So we have seen several types of instruction we have discussed before, and then we have constraints. These are guardrails, or these are using company policy to set standard for the agent. So you also implement guardrails within prompts. You tell agent what it should never do. You tell agent to act as, to assume an expertise. Then you can also give an examples, and then you can also give an example of what is you should never do. So it is from the prompt that you can also tell the agent to escalate to human in the loop for tasks it should never perform. So setting constraint is setting guardrail for the agent through the prompt. Then expected output. So this is part of the goal. So goal is what the output you should achieve after implementing all the instruction that it has been loaded with. Then the expected output is the output after or using the prompt. So what is the output is expected to generate? So let's look at the design in depth. Prompts become enterprise assets and must be designed, tested, measured, refined, retested, and approved. Okay, so we have said severally, if you have read my book, Multi-Agent Orchestration Pattern for Enterprise System, said that you should treat prompt as code. So prompts should be fashioned, it should be included in the agentic AI system pipeline during deployment, and it should be passed through CI/CD, it should be tested and approved. Okay, because it can also change, just like business expertise can change. This agent prompt should also be modeled, be fashioned, and be designed and tested. They are also asset. It is not only data that you are treating as an asset, also treat prompt as an asset. That's why you should also set guardrail and the constraints. Okay, so prompt must be properly designed, must be tested, measured, refined, and retested and approved. and they must also be included in the CI/CD pipeline. Effective prompt components include goals, context, instructions, examples when useful, constraints, okay, when needed, and expected output. Very, very important, as we have discussed in the architecture. We have evaluation metric. Evaluation metric for prompt include accuracy, consistency, relevance, format compliance, tone alignment, reprompting rate, clarification request, and hallucination frequency. So these are very, very important. And then we have testing method, how you can test prompt. Okay, the most popular way of testing prompt is A/B testing. So this is using what you design and testing what you are getting. A/B testing is testing what you have designed and also testing from the user end, from the user experience, testing what the user is getting. You test what you design and test what the user is also implementing, and then you compare the output of the two. That is A/B testing. So it is very, very good for prompts. So testing method include A/B testing, scenario testing. Okay, put particular scenario, test on what you have designed the prompt to do, and test on what you have not designed the prompt to do, and compare the two outputs. A/B testing is testing on what you have designed it to do as a developer, and testing on the user interface, or having the user test and comparing the output of the user test with your own test. Are they the same thing? Scenario testing, you can test on different scenario, on different tasks, and compare the outputs. Then stakeholder review. So also have stakeholder review, because stakeholder are the one that will determine are the one that will determine whether they will retain the application or take down the application. So stakeholder review is also very, very important, and stakeholders can review the output of scenario testing or A/B testing. And then we have modularization. Make sure tests are modular. Do not just give them as a bunch of instruction, as a bunch of a paragraph, or as a bunch of a test or a letter. This should be modularized. They should be broken down into, you can make them sequential, break them down into module, and then set dependency. And then regression validation also validate when they are implementing a sequence. If when you modularize prompts, also make sure to validate module by module, validate all the module in a regression testing. Okay, so we have dynamic 365 end-to-end. So dynamic 365 end-to-end is deploying end-to-end on dynamic 365 application. Building and deploying and monitoring on dynamic 365 is agentic AI system for dynamic 365 end-to-end operationalization and deployment. So the architecture term that you should understand here are sales. Okay, of course, you can integrate AI application with dynamic 365 sales. You can integrate AI application with dynamic 365 finance. You can integrate AI application with dynamic 365 supply chain. And mind you, there are new certification now. There is an Microsoft AI certification for building AI app for agentic. There are certification now on dynamic 365 AI for sales, dynamic 365 AI agentic AI solution for finance, dynamic 365 agentic AI solution for supply chain. These are individual certification or on their own. And if you want to focus or dive deep into this aspect, then you have to start taking all these individual applications. But here we'll just look at the architecture terms, because this is a solution architect focus. Then you also have dynamic 365 of agentic AI solution for customer service, that's CRM, and then you have Dataverse. Everything you are building on dynamic 365, we always store their data on Dataverse. So Dataverse is a database for dynamic 365 application and Power Platform applications. So architecture terms that you should understand here are sales, finance, supply chain, customer service, and Dataverse as the database. So let's look at them in depth. AI business process often spans sales, finance, supply chain, customer service, that's CRM, field service, database, Power Platform, plugins, and external systems. So these are the AI these are the areas where you can deploy and use AI in Dynamic 365. You build and deploy in sales, build and deploy with finance, build and deploy in supply chain, build and integrate with CRM, build and integrate with field service. Remember, this field service is part of the examination. I'm writing the examination today. When I come, I will give you feedback. Um, so Dataverse for storing, Dataverse is where all the agentic AI memory information will be stored when you integrate with Dynamics 365. And then we have Power Automate as the workflow for linking agents together and for trigger. And then we have plugin. You can plug into external system and then you have external system. You can connect to external system also using MCP server. MCP allow you to connect to external system, then to connect to website and application that are on your laptop. You use computer use in Copilot Studio. And then there are also other connectors and plugin that you can use to connect and plug in emails, Office 365 application using Power Automate to the agent. Then we have end-to-end testing. End-to-end testing validate data movement, AI decision, workflow continuity, security, integration point, and grounded sources. So end-to-end testing validates every flow, everything that you are building and integrating with Dynamics 365. End-to-end testing see to every entire process and validates module by module. So checklist. So for conducting in end-to-end testing, your checklist and entity mapping. Your checklist should include entity mappings, how are agents being integrated to this application, how are plugins connection, are they properly connected, is Dataverse properly integrated, is information being stored in Dataverse, supply chain, is it properly integrated, external system, computer use, still responding, computer use to access web application and application of laptop, are they responsive? Are they responsive using MCP server to connect to external tool, the MCP server working? So you also have determine the workflow. Okay, so data movement, AI decision, workflow continuity, security, integration point, and grounded sources are part of what you should validate in Dynamics 365 end-to-end application lifecycle management. So your checklist should include entity mappings, data refresh, dependencies, permission, and AI action validation. So always check all of this and make sure they are properly configured. Then tests should include preconditions, execution steps, AI actions, expected outputs, navigative test, latency, reliability, recovery, and business outcome validation. So your test should also include all of these conditions. So, and the execution step, very, very important. AI action, expected output, negative test. So negative test and all this latency, whether they are responding, reliability, the agent reliable, performance efficiency, is performing, and the recovery and business outcome. So you can still also use the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework to test here end to end, and then you can also use the performance and reliability metric that we have defined before to also collect telemetry metric from here using Dynamics 365 Analytics or Copilot Studio Analytics platform. All right, so we have Copilot test generation. So Copilot test generation is done using Copilot Analytics Studio. So part of Analytic Insight platform in Copilot Studio is where you can, generate a metric or output of test of any agent that you test using Copilot platform. So strategy for creating test cases using Copilot. By using Copilot, and these are the architecture terms here. We have edge cases. So when you are integrating with ecosystem outside of 365 or Dynamics 365, or how they will perform when you've properly deployed, how they are performing when you've integrated the agent with Teams, with Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, or with Dynamics 365 platform as well. Then boundary test. So boundary test to determine whether the agent is bounded and operating within the business boundary. Then test blueprints. So blueprint is just the foundation model, the prompt, and everything, the basis of the model. Then also test dependency. So if you are implementing a workflow, so dependency is a workflow depend on the outcome of their predecessors. So if the predecessor fail, then the next workflow will fail. So test dependency is very important, and your terms here as well is maintainability. Is the system maintainable when it is integrated with any of the platform it's supposed to integrate with? So you can determine this forehand from Copilot Studio. So let's look at it in depth. Copilot can generate test cases. So it can also suggest edge cases. It can create positive, negative boundary variations and improve consistency. So all this can be determined in Analytic Insight in Copilot Studio. Then architect must define a framework around Copilot generated tests instead of relying on automation alone. So do not rely on automation alone. Do not rely on agent flow or Power Automate alone. Also define framework around Copilot generated tests and properly analyze them. So you can use if you are integrating with Office 365, you can use Office 365 Analytic Platform. Integrating with Dynamic 365, use Dynamic 365 Analytic Platform. Also analyze in Copilot Studio, or you can use Application Insight as a whole. Okay, so blueprint field include test ID, description, preconditions, inputs, steps, expected result, edge cases, and dependencies. So these are the input that you can look into, and they validate Copilot test for completeness, accuracy, clarity, maintainability, business logic, compliance coverage, and scalability. So always make sure you validate across all these specific area and use cases. Very, very important. All right, so this is the end of this section, guys. When we come back, we'll be looking at the uh part 5 of this lesson in domain 3. If you are just joining us, please kindly like and subscribe and share with someone else. Thank you.